Awaken your senses with a curiously refreshing Hendrick's Cucumber Lemonade.
Curious how?
Cue the aroma.
Marvelous.
Cue the taste.
Magnificent.
Cue the cucumber.
That's the refreshing secret.
Hendrick's is uncommonly crafted with cucumbers, roses, artistry, and imagination. Other gins are ordinary, but Hendrick's is
Refreshingly curious.
Discover Hendrick's Gin cocktail recipes at hendricksgin.com. Please drink the unusual responsibly. Hendrick's Gin, 44% alcohol by volume. Bottled and imported by William Grant & Sons, New York, New York. Copyright 2024.
At Mayo Clinic in Florida, we're seeing the unseeable, using advanced imaging technology to uncover details that would otherwise go unnoticed, leading to more accurate diagnoses and treatments. Learn more at mayoclinic.org/possible. Mayo Clinic, you know where to go.
I'm Jason Pack.
And I'm Alex Hall, and this is Disorder, the podcast where we make sense of mad American politics, since that seems to be the theme that never seems to dry up these days, right, Jason?
You know it, and it's also the show where we repurpose Handel's Messiah to commemorate July 21st, 2024, the moment where we rejoice greatly. Yes, I would have liked it to have come sooner. Yes, it could have been engineered more gracefully 1 or 2 days after the debate, but Biden has now given himself an opportunity to go down in the history books as a selfless American leader pulling a modern-day Cincinnatus and finally allowing Obama and Adam Schiff and Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi to bring out their long cane and pull him off the stage so that we can fight this election from a point of strength. Right, Alex?
Yes, if it's not obvious, dear listeners, we are talking about the fact that Biden has announced he's stepping aside. And I do feel this sense of energy and excitement, a little sadness, but a whole lot of relief, because the way we were headed, Trump was walking away with this. And in this episode, we can talk a little bit about the RNC convention last week and what the selection of J.D. Vance means for the ticket. But now the story is back on the Democrats, and they have a chance to shake this race up. And suddenly, Trump is the old white guy who nobody wants to see running again. So this is a real moment and a real opportunity. So Jason, it was only a week ago that we were talking about where were you when you heard the shot that didn't reverberate around the world, the attempted assassination attempt on Donald Trump. So where were you when you heard that Joe Biden had indeed decided to step down?
I was at my house, as I frequently do. I was hosting a Shwet, as a multiplayer game of backgammon is known, with my Greek and Greek Cypriot friends that I play with frequently. We were enjoying the beautiful weather, playing some backgammon. We also gamble at politics, and fortunately, because our bookmaker was not in town, I was surrounded by Democrats and labor supporters, and we had been kicking ourselves each week saying, how is it that he hasn't stepped down yet? He's got to step down. Jason, you're the American. What's going to make him step down? And then today the Shwet started and I said, you know, there's been a tip-off that he might step down and that he's considering it. But then we scheduled this emergency cast for 7 p.m. British Standard Time, exactly 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And we decided to not record then because he had said earlier in the weekend that he was going to campaign next week. And I was like, oh no, why is he doing that? Maybe that's going to prolong this. And then I got a flurry of excited texts from friends. Everyone knows how excited I am. And we believe in the gambling universe that Biden was only 20 or 30% to win the race if he had stayed in. And now it's back to a horse race. We're probably underdogs. The opposing horse has a lead. It's coming in from a running start, and we have to build momentum from a standing start. But we have a new and fresh horse, which is young and motivated and can, reshape the narrative. Where were you, Alex?
Last night, I was at a dinner party with a whole group of friends, and I have to say the mood in the room was one of real anger and frustration. Most of the people there like Joe Biden, but the single biggest passion was we all absolutely are terrified of what a Trump-Vance presidency will mean. And so there was this anger. What is he waiting for? And this anger, which I think a lot of American voters share, of how did the Democrats let it come to this? How did they allow Biden to run? What on earth were his team thinking? What were his family thinking, his closest advisors? Because they must have seen that he was not capable of running, let alone, possibly lasting out another 4-year term. So there was a lot of anger. And I think, thankfully, the decision today will have lanced that boil. And now, of course, on Twitter, Biden is being hailed as the saint and the Pope and the Almighty and another George Washington turning down another chance at running. I mean, the accolades pouring into Joe Biden possibly are going too far in the other direction for my taste. And yet, by stepping down, he has done, and the Democrats have done, what the Republicans are refusing to do, which is recognizing they have a candidate that the majority of Americans are not enthusiastic about. And the candidate himself has put country before party and self. And that is just amazing. And this is what the Republicans are not doing. They are sticking with a candidate that senior members of the party must know is a highly flawed candidate. And Trump, it's all about him. So the Democrats are really upending this race and shifting the narrative. Pelosi has done what Mitch McConnell did not have the courage to do.
Well
and
said.
It's to their credit.
It's very much to their credit. And I want to take away some of the cynicism. The reason that I'm rejoicing greatly, albeit only for 2 or 3 minutes, because we're then going to have to put our pedal to the metal for fundraising and mega ordering and all of that, is people rarely voluntarily give up power. And the greater the power, the less likely they are to give it up. And part of the delusion that Biden has been under these last 4 or 5 weeks is that he likes being in power. He likes calling the shots, and he hasn't wanted that some congressional people can just take him out. But our nation is one that has been founded by Cincinnatus-style people who put country above party, and they put party above the individual. And Washington said he wasn't going to run for more than 2 terms, and he did it. And FDR ran when he didn't want to, despite his health, because we needed to finish the war. And if Biden, by stepping down, has done so soon enough that he saves our democracy, then all of the encomiums to him will be accurate. He has done a huge amount on infrastructure, on prescription drug prices, on the CHIPS Act. He has really reduced inflation and kept the American economy ahead of its peer G7 countries. He's been a fairly effective president, and I think that his record would compare quite favorably with that of Obama, actually, and certainly favorably with that of some of his Republican recent predecessors, from W. Bush to Trump himself. I think we would have been in a better position, of course, if after the midterms in 2022, when we defeated a lot of the Trump-endorsed candidates, he had said, I'm only a bridge candidate. I'm stepping down now from a point of strength. And we had had 18 months to build up our chosen hero. But, better late than never. And I understand this was a very fraught decision for the man. So mega orderers out there, I'm sure that you probably have that kind of inner conflict, like a little bit of anger or resentment. If he was just going to drop out, why didn't he do it sooner? Why didn't he admit that he had this cognitive decline? Why did his aides put him out for this debate if they knew how bad, his ability to perform was? All of those what ifs. But bygones now need to be bygones. And we're a forward-looking pod. We actually believe that there is a reality where we don't have a nuclear holocaust, where the Ukrainians don't get defeated, and where there can be a semblance of order facing things like climate change AI regulation, and all of that goes through the path to the White House this term because, and you're going to tell us more about the Republican National Convention that you watched, the other side has doubled down on illogical populism, from tariffs to a culture war to a grievance-based, almost white nationalist politics. Now is our chance to put forth the positive case for how America can be orderers domestically and work with its allies abroad. So I am cautiously energized that whether it's a Harris ticket with many potential others or something else, that now we can make the case for what constructive coalition-based ordering is.
All right. So I think had he stepped down in 2022 or announced he was going to step down in 2022, yes, that would have given more time for the Democrats to organize themselves and hold a more proper process to identify a successor. However, in some ways, I think this last minute switch in some ways may work to their advantage because it's definitely galvanized the race. They also now know who and what they're up against because we've just seen the Republican National Convention and the nomination of J.D. Vance. It's made it very clear what kind of campaign and what kind of message the Republican ticket is going to be campaigning on. And now they can try and choose candidates to go up against that. Whereas had the Democrats chosen their candidate 18 months ago, the Republicans would have been attacking them and chipping away at them this whole time. So I'm going to switch now to the Republican National Convention, and then let's come back to what might be the good ticket against that. I want to talk about the Republican National Convention. You were very lucky, Jason, to be in the UK and Europe for last week, so that most of the convention took place, hopefully, after you were long tucked up in bed. Because I have to say, watching it in real time in the US, it was like watching a freak show, a circus, a Las Vegas on steroids. Gone were the traditional Republicans, gone were the sort of club Republicans, the gentleman Republicans, the distinguished foreign policy Republicans. This was like the worst stereotype of the most extreme MAGA Republicans you could imagine. There were wrestlers like Hulk Hogan. There were World Fight Championship promoters. There were aging rock stars. There were more facelifts and transplants and polyfiller fleshed out bodies than you can imagine, most of them in the Trump family. There were people wearing toy pillows on their ears in sort of alleged sympathy and solidarity with Trump. There were ludicrous rants from the stage. There were a few very poignant moments. I have to acknowledge there was a moment where they had Gold Star families that are families of veterans who were killed in action. In particular, there were the families of those who were killed during America's withdrawal from Afghanistan. And that was a truly poignant moment. There was a very touching tribute to Donald Trump by one of his granddaughters that was quite authentic and sounded real. So it wasn't all a freak show.
And you know what? It wasn't a freak show, Alex, was having the head of the most important union in the United States, which shows how much the Republican Party has changed. And J.D. Vance's selection cements that shift. So it's incorrect to say that the Democratic Party has always been the party of labor, but pretty much since the neoliberal reforms of the Reagan-Thatcher era, the Democrats have moved towards becoming a higher tax, more redistributive party that working people roughly feel is more aligned with their interests. But since the culture wars started under Bush and Cheney, W. Bush, and now culminating under Trump, a lot of non-college white working class men have gravitated to the Republican Party, and they've been clamoring in post-industrial areas. Think Ohio and Michigan and Western Pennsylvania, which are the equivalents of the Red Wall in England. They've been calling for protectionism, tariffs, subsidies, and kind of, for lack of a better term, dictatorial anti-market policies. And now the Republican Party has taken the mask off that it's no longer the free trade party of Reagan. It's something completely different. And it is about me versus you, zero-sum populism. People occasionally accuse Labour in the UK of being the quote-unquote class war party. It isn't, but they accuse it of being it. Now we know that the Republicans are the zero-sum. We want in the industries that support us to rig the whole economic system to benefit those made in America or coal jobs or whatever. And J.D. Vance is willing to upend America's position as guarantor of international commerce to have some fractional sectional wins for some factory workers in Tennessee. It's very interesting to see that change cemented as we did during this convention.
The selection of J.D. Vance is very interesting. A lot of us were hoping that Trump might try to balance the ticket by nominating a more moderate, a slightly more traditional Republican, perhaps Glenn Youngkin from Virginia or Doug Burgum. And then that would sort of allow him to reach out a little bit more to the center ground and people who are feeling disillusioned by the Democrats, not enthusiastic about Biden, maybe a little bit more sympathetic to Trump in the wake of the assassination attempt and thinking maybe Trump's going to be this changed figure. But what he's actually done by selecting J.D. Vance is double down on a very isolationist, very populist, very protectionist ticket. But here's the interesting thing. I slightly disagree with you that this is a reaction to a demand from the sort of blue-collar worker in Michigan or Wisconsin or Pennsylvania for protectionism. I don't think they fully understand what it's going to mean, this America First policy. And J.D. Vance was very famous for 8 years ago, completely disparaging Donald Trump and saying that his policies were going to hurt American working classes, and they were absolutely the wrong policies. And what has happened is that J.D. Vance has changed his views and embraced policies such as protectionism and raising tariffs on imports into the US, which are absolutely going to kill consumers and working class families in America. And the only logic can be is that it's completely opportunistic. This is his ticket. He's coasting in as a way to come in as Trump's heir apparent. But it's completely cynical and it's completely opportunistic because these are not policies that actually are going to help the working class. But this language of America first, we're going to protect ordinary Americans, sounds appealing. But it's not
straight neopopulism, Alex.
It's not responding to a demand from those workers. It's feeding them a narrative that they think that sounds attractive, but is actually completely wrong.
As usual, we're in violent agreement because it's pure neopopulism. Yes, there was no demand for these particular industrial policies or this bizarre America First pro-tariff agenda. But what it is red meat for the culture war, for the America First. And the reason I call it neopopulism, I look at neopopulism as having the unique dimension that it proposes solutions which are no solution at all. Many people say, oh, this is just populism, meaning it is favorable for the people, but might be bad for the long term. No, it's not favorable for the people. It keeps the conflict going. In other words, these pure neo-populist things don't actually solve the crisis. Trump and Vance are not going to build the wall. They're not going to decrease immigration. They're not going to magically recreate the car and coal and, silicon manufacturing sector in America. Those things are gone. You can't roll the clock back. But by throwing all this red meat, they're going to create grievance and grievance and grievance. And if it's not done, they'll just say, it was those horrible Chinese who rigged the system against us, and the deep state prevented us from having these policies. Or if we got in, but the Democrats filibuster it, it's the Dems that prevented us from putting a 60% tariff on Chinese goods. They're not going to tell you that the reason the Dems did that is it would have tanked the economy. He's saying such wild stuff. He's talking about devaluing the US dollar. One of the things that literally America's world-beating economy has been based on is the sanctity of the US dollar. We've never defaulted. We've never formally devalued. We have the reserve currency since 1956, when Anthony Eden invaded Suez and the US said, if you don't withdraw, we're not going to loan you more money. The US became the reserve currency, and we have pursued a policy whereby the dollar is king. All oil is traded in it. Most international trade goes through the dollar. J.D. Vance would upend that to create perennial chaos and disorder so that he could then run on, it's the evil industrialist globalist class that have caused this crisis. You need to vote for us for a third and ninth term. And I almost think that maybe Trump has overplayed it. The choice of J.D. Vance was a cocky one about succession. Whereas if he had wanted to balance the ticket, I mean, you mentioned Youngkin, that would have really scared me. But even Burgum or a woman, oh my God, imagine if he'd chosen Nikki Haley, we couldn't have come back against that because she's strong on Ukraine, she's a moderate, she believes in the rules-based international order. He would get all the Trumpians plus some extra Republicans. Now, by doubling down, I think that the anti-Trump Republicans are not going to drift back to Trump. And a lot of business people who believe that you need a strong dollar and you need a stable international system where we're not in a trade war with China, they're not going to vote Republican and they're not going to make those big donations. And if they see Kamala Harris as someone who is committed to the rules-based international order, working with big business, working with our European allies, I'm feeling like they have vulnerabilities now because they've so played into this neo-populist disordering.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think, and I hope, of course, that it is actually overconfident and it's a mistake because he won't bring anybody new to the ticket and he will actually repel independents and people who were on the fence and not sure. And the Democrats have a chance to grab those folk provided they come up with a centrist candidate, not a leftist. And we'll come back to that. The thing about J.D. Vance is he's actually quite a compelling figure. I mean, his backstory is amazing. I absolutely loved his book, Hillbilly Elegy.
So did I.
Which came out with perfect timing just in the year that Trump was elected and seemed to explain why so many people in hard-scrabble communities in the Rust Belt of America were so disaffected. And he also really compellingly explained how hard it is for people to break out of that community. And he got a series of lucky breaks to enable him to go to Yale and gradually get himself in the position where he's now part of the establishment. So he has this very compelling story. He's very articulate. He has a very nice family. So he's got lots of assets. However, when I listened to his acceptance speech, it was very dangerous. I mean, really nasty rhetoric about immigration, really nasty rhetoric about isolationism. And the way to make America secure is not to retreat from the world. The way for America's economy to grow is not to put up tariff barriers. So there is now an opportunity for the Democrats. I just want to finish this segment on the RNC convention. I mean, what is certainly true is that there was a lot of energy, there was a lot of passion, there was a lot of confidence, there was a lot of unity because most of the people, the traditional Republicans just stayed away. Then we come to the final night of the convention where things have been going really well. The final night of the convention was an absolute horror show. The only thing that was missing, somebody tweeted to me in response to my comment about what a freak show it was, the only thing that was missing was mud wrestling in bikinis, because it was such a sort of spectacle with Hulk Hogan ripping his shirt off and, you know, all these characters yelling down the microphone. And then Trump comes on and he begins in quite a subdued way, talking about his near death. And I mean, he really did come very close to death. I mean, this was a sort of very sobering experience. The first 10, 15 minutes of his speech were quite compelling. And then the old Trump came in and he just rambled for another hour. And the audience, you could see it, the audience was sort of trying to stay energized, but he just killed it. He just went on and on with his usual rambling. He talked about Hannibal Lecter. He ranted about criminals and killers, and he just completely lost it. So I ended the convention thinking, yeah, there is an opening here. He's selected a vice presidential candidate who's going to scare away a lot of people. And he himself is still the same old Donald Trump. So let's come back to the Democrats again. Who do they need to pick? And how will they pick this new ticket? Are they better to swing behind Kamala very quickly and then focus on who she picks as her VP nominee? Or do they have to do a mini convention? And you and I have talked about the fact that the UK and France, we pull together elections in 4 weeks or less. I think they've got time. So what would you like to see happen?
So there's the technical aspect, and then there's the choreographed media aspect, and then there's the incumbency versus change candidate issues. So I'm going to take those in reverse order. This is an anti-incumbent cycle. Keir did very well because he was not the incumbent. Macron got battered and barely held on in the second round of the legislative because people are anti-incumbent. They're fed up. AFD did well because it's against Olaf Scholz. This is an anti-incumbent cycle. We should pick someone both at the head of the ticket and the VP that represents change. Kamala is change in that she's a woman and she would be, you know, the first South Asian president and the first female president. But she's been associated with some of Biden's failures. She will be tarred on the Gaza issue, although not as badly as Biden. I would like to see more change, fresh blood, so that we can now do what Keir did and present ourselves as out with the bad, out with the old, in with the new. Then there's this next issue that I mentioned, which is the technical legal bit. I don't fully understand it, Alex, but there's the question of litigation in Ohio. If we wait to the convention, select only at the convention, and don't have a name for the Ohio ballots. I think it's not that important because we haven't won Ohio in the last couple of cycles, and our path to the White House is about Michigan, Arizona, Georgia, and Pennsylvania, and not so much about Ohio.
Can I just quickly ask, what is the issue with Ohio? Do they close their ballots before the convention? So
As I said, I don't want to say something which is not completely accurate, but I do know that there is an issue. If Ohio doesn't have the names of the full ticket prior to the DNC being done, there are some issues with getting on the ballot. And I think that that's stupid, and we can litigate against the Ohio law and maybe get on the Ohio ballot. But that's not the reason to go with Harris. In other words, just to get on the Ohio ballot isn't the reason to go with Harris. We don't actually need Ohio. Ohio was the swing state par excellence in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. It was because W took Ohio and Florida that he won against Gore in 2000. But this is a different reality. Ohio and Florida are no longer swing states. They've gone red. We need to focus on the ones that I said: Michigan, Arizona, Georgia, Pennsylvania. I think because of the Michigan Arab and Muslim votes, it would be nice to have change and a distance from the Gaza debacle that we've had. And then I think it would also be nice to have an open convention where people feel like they've more been involved in the process rather than that there's just an elite switch up and they've jammed this down people's throats. It's known that I'm a bit of a centrist, so that I like a Klobuchar or a Buttigieg. That's known. However, Klobuchar endorsed Harris immediately. Whether we go for, Gavin Newsom or Gretchen Whitmer as the VP rather than as the top of the ticket, I'm open to all of that. I think it would be difficult to have two women. In other words, Harris and Whitmer, probably not. Maybe Harris and Newsom, maybe Harris and Buttigieg. Then there's a complexity there. I think it's difficult to have a black South Asian woman and a gay guy. You know what I mean? There needs to, toss a little bit of red meat. Probably one middle-aged white guy does need to be on this ticket. But we need to craft a narrative that this ticket represents change and that Biden was a bridge candidate and that we understand that what's needed in 2025 is not what was needed in 2021. At the end of the pandemic and at the end of the first Trump presidency, status quo ante was needed. All Joe needed to do was say, I'm going to go back to the way that centrist normal America was done. And I've been in the Senate since 1972. I understand the legislative process. I can do that. Now something new is needed. There are new world challenges, pushing the Ukrainians over the top, dealing with the issues of China and Taiwan, dealing with some of the economic issues that we have, dealing with the threats of AI and, just tons and tons of things. So I'd like to see some people who are more energized, younger, and maybe bringing a little bit of that anti-incumbency vibe.
Jason, that was a masterclass. I find that all incredibly persuasive. I mean, there does seem to be some momentum behind Kamala Harris, and Biden endorsing her so quickly obviously makes her the front runner. But Kamala Harris herself, in her tweets, hasn't taken it for granted. She has said, I look forward to pitching myself as a potential standard bearer. I mean, I can't remember the exact words, but she has implied she's not taking it for granted, that she just inherits the mantle. And I do really like your point about this not looking like it's a stitch up of the sort of old Democrat elites behind closed doors, stitching it up and presenting people with a candidate. If it is Harris, it can't just be, all the sort of power brokers behind the scenes immediately rush to anoint her. A bit like you, I've been a bit surprised at how quickly some people have come out and immediately rushed to endorse, rather than just giving a sort of slight 24 hours to see what the situation is like. But I guess elders in the Democrat Party are thinking there's a trade-off between quickly coalescing around a candidate and avoiding kind of messy internal tussles versus trying to allow new faces to come forward and a little bit of an open convention. And there are pros and cons on both sides. I mean, if it is Harris, however, I do think she has to choose somebody very centrist and somebody who appeals to the same demographic as J.D. Vance. It needs to be somebody like Josh Shapiro from Pennsylvania or Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona, somebody from those swing states that you were talking about.
I like Whitmer for that reason, though, because the race is going to be won or lost in Michigan or Pennsylvania. So I get the Shapiro thing, but I love the idea of getting someone that brings with them Michigan, Pennsylvania, or Arizona. And I love the idea of us having an open convention where all of the candidates can put forward their ideas. And Buttigieg is going to be a little different on this, and Harris is going to make her point, and we're going to have some different economic ideas. But right now, Alex, let's order the disorder. Let's move to the next stage. I am so excited. I just can't hide it. I want...
Don't sing. Please don't sing anymore.
Oh, okay.
Don't sing. We have enough
singing. After the break, when we order the disorder, I promise I won't sing.
Hey, we're invited to the Johnson Summer Pool Party this Saturday.
Oh, Saturday? But that's when the Blinds guy's coming to give us a quote.
Oh, I already found everything we need at Blinds.com. They're totally online, so we don't have to wait around all day just to get a quote. And they're sending us free samples.
Well, Blinds.com sounds like a no-brainer.
Shop Blinds.com now for summer savings up to 45% off. Save up to 45% at Blinds.com. Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Now that we're back from the break, I want to read you two very important quotes. First is Nicholas Kristof's paraphrase of Shakespeare about Biden. Nothing became his presidency like the leaving of it. And then the Guardian op-ed starts with, legend has it that when King George III heard that George Washington, the first U.S. president, had decided to retire after his second term, he remarked, if he does that, he will be the greatest man in the world. So I have goosebumps, Alex. I had put a bottle of Taittinger on ice in the fridge on Friday when I thought this was going to happen. And then I was like, well, I'm not going to serve it with the backgammon guys because he's not going to pull out and whatever. I'll just open something else. Then when it happened, I had it in the fridge. I pulled it out. We're ready to record. I think it's important for us to just realize most people don't voluntarily give up power. They run off the cliff in the train, poised for the disaster because they so want to cling on to power. And I hope that if all goes well, Joe Biden is remembered extremely favorably. He only didn't run in 2016 and prevent us from the first Trump term because of the tragedy of the loss of his son, Beau Biden. He only ran in 2020 because he felt that he was the man who could bring the African-American community after the South Carolina primary to defeat Trump. And now he's only stepped down when he became fully convinced that he wasn't the man to save American democracy. He was staying in only because he felt, maybe Harris's poll numbers aren't good enough. Maybe we haven't choreographed this well enough. When he was convinced that he couldn't save American democracy, he stepped down. So if we have a mega orderer-in-chief award, I would like to give it to one Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. You are hereby appointed to be the mega orderer-in-chief for one day.
And we all know who the disorderer-in-chief is. That we are now facing an election of order versus disorder. The rule of law versus chaos. American engagement and leadership in the world versus American isolationism, retrenchment, and empowering and emboldenment of authoritarian leaders. There was something else I wanted to mention about this race. I was really struck by how so many Silicon Valley entrepreneurs and Elon Musk have swung behind the Trump ticket.
Oh, but the answer for that is simple. That's all about antitrust. It's not really about Trump. Other than Amazon, because Trump has a feud with Jeff Bezos, whether it's Musk or, pick a thing from Google to Facebook, they know that Trump is not going to pursue an antitrust case to break up the big tech firms.
Yeah, I know, but this is precisely the issue I wanted to make with respect to J.D. Vance, who is sort of, I'm there for the ordinary working man, and he's supporting policies that will completely devastate America economically. And the ticket is backed by the huge kind of mega big business companies that have done so much in terms of offshoring jobs and undermining confidence in America and sowing discord and allowing misinformation to spread. And so J.D. Vance and Trump are campaigning as if they speak for ordinary Americans and pursuing policies that are highly dangerous. This is the other thing that the Democrat ticket needs to do. They have to take back the narrative that Trump and his kind represent the authentic voice of real Americans, that they are daring to say and speak out loud how ordinary Americans feel. This is the shtick that Nigel Farage tried to run with in the UK, that somehow reform represents ordinary Brits, and this political correctness and wokeness means people can't say what they really think. The Democrats, Keir Starmer did a very good job of saying, no, we represent ordinary British people. And the Democrats need to do that as well. They cannot be the party of liberal elites in New York or California. They have to find a voice that says, no, we represent Americans. We are the patriots of this country. We are pursuing policies that will help every American. And they have to grab that narrative back.
Agreed. To order the disorder, they need to present a vision. It's an economic vision where we win together rather than the Republican vision, which is my segment wins while your segment loses. We raise tariffs in a way that hurts your industry and helps ours. We hurt China and help us. We hurt this and help that. They need to present a new view of what American internationalism in the mid-21st century is. The initial Biden term was to correct some of the mistakes of our early 21st century governance. Now is the time to move to the mid-21st century. So to wrap up the episode, Alex, tell me, how will you remember July 21st, 2024?
I think it's too soon to tell. I have to say, I leapt out of my chair when I read the news. I felt happy. I felt a huge sense of relief. I now feel very energized, and I plan to get out on the streets. I've never been involved in American politics before. I've never done any campaigning or lobbying. Of course, I haven't been an American citizen. It would be grossly presumptuous of me to do that. But now I have a vote and I am an American citizen, and I intend to get involved in the campaign. So I feel motivated.
Alex, I hereby pronounce you as American as apple pie.
Oh, thank you.
And on that note, mega orderers, I have really enjoyed sharing this exciting, happy, hopeful moment. Of course, it may not pan out, but it is a hopeful moment. I think that we have a good 10 to 15% more chance to save the American democratic experiment, to save the Donbass and Crimea, and to save Taiwan and the international trading system than we did if Biden has stayed in the race. So let's count our victories. And as always, thank the one, the only, the mega orderer-in-chief, our producer, George McDonough, and our executive producer, Neil Fern. What should the listeners do, Alex, if they want to find out more about our pod?
They should tap on follow wherever you get your podcasts. They should definitely read Jason's Substack, which will include a link to my latest article for Byline Times. Thank you, Jason. And keep following us, because we are going to keep talking about this issue. There are many twists and turns to come, I suspect.
And we love our elections. So on Thursday, the day that the Tunisian presidential election was supposed to happen, we are going to have an episode about that postponed Tunisian election with the leading Tunisian opposition presidential candidate, my good friend Olfa Hamdi. It's a great episode. I hope you enjoy it. That's all for now. Rejoice greatly, mega orderers.
That's all from him, and that's all from me. Thank you very much. Goodbye.